Welcome back to the Long Game Podcast. I'm Victoria Puente-Peters, and I'm here with my colleagues Quentin Phillips and Sajade Miller. We started this podcast because America seems to be more divided than ever, and we find that we are focusing more on our differences rather than our shared humanity, and we want to evaluate that problem, and we want to invite you to explore solutions with us. Today, we're going to be looking into identity politics.
We're talking about partisanism, tribalism, and the way political affiliations become identity markers.
And so we're going to explore all those things that maybe we shouldn't be exploring, right? But no, dog whistles, intentional confusion that keeps us at each other's throats. Most importantly, we'll ask who benefits when we're divided.
It feels like our politics have become less about ideas and more about identities. What team are you on? Who do you belong to? These questions dominate the conversations before we ever get to values, solutions, or nuances. But there's a deeper truth. We're all products of our environment. The communities we're raised in, the news we consume, even the algorithms we scroll through, all of these shape our perception of the world. And this is what I always think of is that viral dress that was going around. It resurfaced recently because it hit its 20-year anniversary of the black and blue dress, which I'm going to put up on the screen. But for you all, just as a test, what do you see when you look at this?
A black and blue dress.
Blue and gold.
Blue and gold. So to me, it is unmistakably white and gold. I do not see even
You see white.
White and gold. 100%. I know.
I didn't think we was really going to get back there. I feel like everything from like 20 years ago is resurfacing now all of a sudden.
How do you see white and gold?
How do you see black and blue?
How do y'all see white anything?
I don't see white anything.
How y'all see black anything?
I mean, look at this. How do you not? I mean, it's so strange and it blows my mind. So apparently 50% of the population sees it as black and blue and the other 50% sees it as white and gold. And I guess some see it as blue. What do you see? You see this as blue?
Wow. No, that's black.
No, that's gold.
That's gold to you.
Yes.
And what does this look
Blue.
like? That's blue. Okay.
Yes.
No.
What do you see?
No, that's obviously black. And I'm right.
Which part?
Because my reality is the reality. And that's blue.
Which part? The sleeve?
The sleeve is blue. And if you go to the left, that's blue. Skip that line right there.
Okay.
Up.
This top part?
That's black.
Okay.
And go down. That's blue. Go down. Black. Blue.
Okay.
Black.
I can see that a little bit. It ain't black. I'm going to go gold. Turner's gold, but gold. But at least we in the similar vein.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can ride with you. Because where you see blue, I see blue. So
This is gold, white, gold. And I mean, it doesn't look at all like that at all, which brings me to my point. We don't even see possibly reality the same way.
Wow.
And I really believe that based on the algorithms that are influencing us in the news media outlets we're watching, we are living in different realities depending on what's being fed to us. Because like I'll see people on TV talking about how the left is so violent and that they're intentionally trying to do things to the right. And I'm like, what are they seeing? Where are they living that they're experiencing this? And I think a lot of it is coming from what they're consuming online. And I think that's a huge part of what is contributing to our division. And then another thing that always blows my mind about like our perception and reality is that not everybody thinks in like a dialogue or a monologue. I'm an external processor, but I also am always thinking. I can't shut my brain down.
I never knew you were an external processor.
Yeah. and I'm always, my mind is always like, there's always a dialogue happening. And then I found out that not everybody experiences thought like that. Some people experience thought through images. And I was curious, how about y'all? Do you have a constant monologue going on or do you see images when you're thinking?
Monologue could be a word.
Or even a conversation could be two-way.
It's more like narration.
Narration?
And maybe that's just narcissism because I feel like I'm the star of my own movie. But I feel like I'm always hearing narration. But it can be dialogue because usually there's some philosophical uttering that is happening. there's some deconstruction of what's in front of me or some deep dive into the observation I'm having at the moment.
Right.
And then it's internalized to some level of my goodness. Is this making me good? Or am there something about me not good? The fact that I feel the way I feel in the moment or see something the way I see it. And how do I scrub that to make it good?
So you're debating or you're kind of
Yeah.
having a discussion.
Yeah.
About morality.
About morality.
Your moral compass.
Is philosophy and morality nearly at all times going on in my brain?
I love this conversation about metacognition as the educator here, like thinking, how do we think, how do we process information? What are we telling ourselves? And I think that's the beauty of America. I think that's the beauty of the world. I think that's the beauty of the learning process. We all experience a phenomena, and we, based off of our internal schema, the way we view life, the structures that we have, the cognitive filters and structures that we've amassed throughout our lifetime, and we say, this goes there, this goes there. And we look for association, word or pictorial association to help us understand what we're experiencing. And I think that's why experience, and that's why information, and that's why our backgrounds are really important to who we are and how we observe a particular thing. And then there's some wiring, some neuroscience in there.
How do you think? What happens in your brain?
I'm thinking about starting to think next week, but I haven't really thought in the last nearly 40 years. That's been an issue. My wife's been talking to me about that. 13 years of marriage. No, I think in terms of how this thing that I'm experiencing resonates, how it impacts me. I tell myself, I narrate as well. I tell myself the stories. I talk to myself in my brain quite a bit. Mostly it's task oriented. I have this insatiable need to complete stuff, get things done. And so I'm often trying to negotiate where I am juxtaposition to this self-induced list I have to get done. It's a narration, not in pictures, but narration.
Yeah. And I asked my husband, he thinks in pictures, which makes a lot of sense. I wonder if people who think in a monologue or there's a dialogue going on versus pictures, if they are better external processors than internal processors. Maybe the internal processors are the ones that see images. I'm not sure. But it's just, again, our realities, even into how we think, are so different. And so, and then there's the background, how we were raised, the things that were imprinted on us when we were younger. One of my favorite authors, Don Miguel Ruiz, calls it the domestication, where as we're growing up, we're told, do this, don't do this. And eventually those, parenting or whoever's the authority in our life, what they are telling us to do in our formative years, that becomes our internal dialogue. We start self-policing basically. And those types of things impact how we interact with the world and the lens through which we see things. I think that is a base consideration that we need to take into account when we look at what is dividing people and why I really think that a lot of this is also a communication issue. We're getting a lot of communication from some probably very sophisticated algorithms and people with agendas that may not be in the best interest of our population that are, I think, contributing to this divide. And then there's that personal way that we're receiving and reacting. And I feel like we're being manipulated as a country to turn against each other instead of looking at possibly what could be more of a class issue.
It's bondage. It's all bondage. That gives me anxiety, right? And I think that's part of it. We think too much. And so I don't know if there's any yogis that are part of the community, but part of my yoga practice is mindfulness, being present in the moment. And I think I shared one of my favorite books, the book that saved my life, The Power of Now.
Oh, yeah.
By Eckhart Tolle, talking about perpetual thought trap us in the perpetual sort of rationalization and negotiation that we do in our mind all day. That's really a source of bondage. It's a distraction, right? And it robs us of our ability to be present and experience life in that moment. And so even though we're talking about this, we know we're functional, very productive adults. So there's a lot of thought that happens, but always thinking about something and the perpetual thought sort of hijack the joy of the moment. I think the world needs more mindfulness. Let's just focus on here we are now. Let's not think about the past or the future because they don't exist. They're not real. What's real is what's here right now. And then our reality is really how we experience the moment for moment's sake, not juxtaposition to a past feeling or emotion or future hope.
But does that contribute to the apathy that we see at times?
I think if you're a bad person or you're an apathetic person, I think, yeah. But I think mindfulness is a great thing, and it helps us it's a reset
I do
button.
too. I'm just curious.
Hold on, is that synonymous? Because you said a bad person or apathetic person? Are we making those synonyms? Like,
I think if there's a great moral dilemma and crisis and you choose not to engage, or you choose not to vote, or you choose not to opine or intervene when someone's
Or
life,
look away.
or you look away. Yeah, I think that's a bad person, in my opinion. I think we're all called to activism. I think Dolores Huerta said that. Every moment is a chance for activism, a moment to make a difference, a moment to choose the path that he or she would like the world to embark upon.
That is a confusing balance, though, of how do you stay mindful and present and not worrying all the time when you've got all this chaos happening around us. And is it even real? How much of it is real and how much of it is just rage baiting, fear mongering tactics?
And you posed the question, do you agree? How do you feel about that?
okay, so because this leads me to thinking about what James Baldwin said, which you've quoted before as well, and him talking about how infuriating it is to be Black and conscious in America. But it feels like a duty to be Black and conscious simultaneously. Because to be one without the other feels incomplete. It feels apathetic because it feels like that's where we're getting apathy from, particularly in our community.
And I think the apathy comes from, and I'll add to Baldwin's quotes. Yes, I'm a James Baldwin fanatic, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things he said
And I'm lost. I don't know what y'all are.
He's about to break it down so it can forever and consistently be broke.
No, but he said not everything that's faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced, right? And he's talking about being able to think, not just going on. So many times the Black experience in America, and he talked about this, was the need to survive and the need to protect. So the cortisol levels were up, and we always had to survive and have our head on the swivel, and we didn't think about what was happening. We thought about survival in that moment. But true consciousness, the stream of consciousness, helps us to think about the macro implications of what's going on, the causal factors, the reactions, and how it affects future generations. And when you step back and really think about what's going on in the world, you're like, man, that's messed up.
Yeah.
And how might we?
Yeah.
That's where the stream of consciousness, and he's talked a lot about Black conscious, to be Black and to be conscious, is sometimes they were at war because you were just thinking about survival and not necessarily thinking about true consciousness. And I'll take that further, and it's not Black and conscious. I think it's human and conscious. And I think it's equally the responsibility of all members of humanity to be conscious and think about the impact that our actions and words have on others holistically, and sort of step outside of the bubble that forces us to just survive or exist or become apathetic.
Yeah. Because talking about ignorance being bliss.
That's right.
Yeah. If I don't know about it, if it's not in my purview, then I can just go on existing and doing me. And that takes a lot of that weight away from having to worry about others. I'm thinking about, like you all are talking about, these things that divide us. And it is, we can talk about the politics, we can talk about the algorithms, we can talk about all of these avenues, right? In so many ways, I do think it boils down to survival, which is one of these themes that's coming up from the conversation we're having now, and selfishness. And I don't always necessarily mean selfishness in a negative connotation. It can be maybe in this particular context, but it's this me and it's this my, because algorithmic media outlet, like all these things, it really is just about how much we're in an echo chamber at this moment. And it's talking about the isolation of us, because even what we're doing right now, having this discourse with one another, sitting down with some topic, it doesn't matter what the topic is, we happen to have these particular ones, but we're laying it on the table and we're saying go. And from that, I have to bring all of me into this conversation, all of my 44 years, all this beautiful melanin, all this top six within me, these things that really encompass and make up who I am, I now bring to the table, and that's accompanied by everything you're going to bring to the table, everything you're going to bring to the table. And even though there are some commonalities within us that we have overlap, it's also such a vastly different experience that each one of us had.
That's right.
In our upbringing and the things that we've gone through and all those things that formulate who we are now, bringing this thing. But saying all that to say that we're able to come, have conversation, deep dialogue about it, and I walk away better because there's something I just could not have brought to the table because I'm not Victoria. I'm not Latina. I'm not a woman. I'm not that. You can go down a list of things that I'm not, that only you would have been able to bring into this space that I now get to glean from, right? And what isolation does is it eliminates me from being able to be educated by you. It eliminates that iron sharpening aspect of things that we're supposed to be having going on. And it feels like so much of that is what's being taken away from many. I'm thinking about coming up in the neighborhood in which I was able to grow up in, knowing who my neighbors were, right? Literally knowing who lived next door to me. Thinking about the nostalgia of borrowing a cup of sugar, going to get a couple of eggs from someone, but having a familiarity with one another where this was a norm.
That's right.
Hey, tell your mama I said hi when you go over there. Hey, I talked to your grandmother today, and like just these things to where there was a communal aspect to what these things look like, to where we're gleaning from one another, we're sharpening one another. I'm getting mentored about all these different things, not even in a formal sense, but they're pouring into me in some way. And then now people don't know who their neighbors are, the person literally next door to them, and are willing to go without instead of knocking on the door and saying, hey, I actually just don't have a couple of eggs. Either I'm going to go to the store and get eggs, or I will go without, instead of actually risking the vulnerability, risking the relationship, risking this opportunity to be able to simply commune with this person and have some type of commonality to where we begin that relational capacity. I'm willing to keep myself in that isolation, but it only does doom to me because I missed the sharpening. I missed the grooming that could have happened.
It's safer though. And I think what you're saying about like us retreating to our places of comfort in terms of not want to be vulnerable to step out. I think that's why we are divided as well, to your point, like tribalism and political partisanism. Like we seek to retreat to places of comfort, and we actually jump into that echo chamber, right? Where we're validated and we have groupthink, right? You guys know the Pew Research Center says most kids identify with the political parties of their parents, which means that from generation to generation to generation to generation, we're just sort of doing what we've always done. And the truth is that many of our political beliefs are shaped by our parents, right? And as we get older and we become more knowledgeable, we can make our own choices. But at the onset of our political sort of engagement, we tend to adopt the political views of our parents. Another study said that, and this is one that's really interesting to me, 2018 showed that hating the other side is now a stronger driver of political identity than one's own political beliefs. So it's not only this is where I'm comfortable, this is the party of my parents, but it's also, you know what? I don't want to be that. I definitely don't want to be that. So I'm going to be this. Yeah. And I think that is mind blowing to me.
You bring up something in this particular instance because I also know you're a parent. There's a wrestling match there, even though, because I want to equip my two sons with my political ideologies because I feel my political ideologies are correct. Very biasly so, right? Of course, everyone does.
Right. And if you're going to live in this house, you're going to think this way.
or at least I want to raise you to.
Yeah.
And simultaneously, I want to raise you to be a free thinker and for you to make your own decisions, so for you to do your own research and develop yourself into your own person. I don't want to create a little robot, but I also have this time with you to where I feel like I can impart values in you, right? How does that come into being? You know what I mean? And what wins out there? And I don't know the balance. I hope I'm doing a great job, but I don't know the balance of the rub even there.
I say the answer is yes. I think the answer is yes. The answer is right, because what you have. And so I think the biggest issue with that is the apathy, right? If you're an apathetic individual or an apathetic voter or not engaged civically or socially, then you tend not to have those conversations with your children. And the people that have those conversations with their children are the more of the extremes on either side. So think about it. What we're doing is we're perpetuating more extremism as we're passing that down to our children. I'm not saying that you're extreme. I'm not saying that I'm extreme. But I can say we talk about politics over. I'm old school. I believe in sitting down. No one eats till we all sit down. Yeah. We say our grace. We talk about what was the brightest thing of your day, what was the darkest part of your day, and then we talk about current events and news. Last night, the conversation was about a current event, a talk show host that's, may or may not be on in my house in the evenings after my children go to sleep, was suspended, right? And so, what is the validity of that? What type of government are we living in if that's allowed to happen? I don't know if it's right or wrong, but we sure talked about it. My 8-year-old son had a lot of opinion about it.
Yes. Oh.
And I'm a little more free-flowing in that, I don't care what you think, what you want to do, as long as you can justify it.
Yeah.
In a reasonable, intelligent, logical way.
Yes.
I'm going to ride with you.
Yes.
And I just hope it aligns with me and what I think.
Right. Right.
And
Absolutely.
I think another important part of it is just to let them know that no matter what their opinion is, you're always going to love them. And I think that that is what we've lost is we can't disagree anymore and still feel love for each other is kind of where it's all going. It's if you don't agree with me, you're the enemy. And that's where we've lost. Well, biblically, we're called to
Go ahead, quote the Bible. Go ahead.
we're called to love God and to love our neighbor.
our
Those are the
neighbors, that's
highest callings. And,
The
you know,
highest,
no matter
the
what, where you are in religion, if you're curious, that's my understanding of what the highest commandments are.
It says it explicitly.
Yeah, that are, is that, I'm newer to quoting Bible, the
It's all
Bible.
good. You quoted it correctly.
Yeah,
Those are the
it's
two.
all good.
Yeah. Anyways, I think that that starts young if you can teach your kids how to have a different opinion and still have respect for that person. And it starts, I think, at the dinner table in those conversations with your kids, right?
Yeah, it should.
As someone who doesn't have kids, I'm guessing that that's how it
No,
works.
well done.
Oh, you're right. But you were a kid. You don't
I
see the
was,
kids.
yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, equally as valid.
Yeah.
And I think to your point, I have so many friends who are not talking to their parents or who disagree with their parents
Yeah.
or who family dinners are estranged or strange because of differences in political ideology.
Absolutely.
And that is just,
It's sad.
yeah, unacceptable.
Very sad. I have family members who it's the same situation and it's tragic.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to the blue dress and the gold dress, or the blue and black as I saw it, in that we experience the world, politics, current events, based off of how we think about things, as opposed to understanding that you saw something different and it's okay.
Yeah.
That's your reality. You saw something different and that's okay. And it's your reality. And because I see you, I love you, I care for you, your opinions are valid to me, it really don't matter. It's a dress. We all saw a dress.
It's all dress.
That's all that matters. And so why quibble over the exact interpretations of what we experienced? And now it's time for a break, and we invite you to stay with us as we deconstruct culture and division in our nation and search for paths to unity. Welcome back. And now let's talk about our second topic of the day. Let's talk about dog whistles. You know, the coded phrases that divide us without ever saying the words out loud. Words like, or phrases like law and order, common sense gun laws, environmental justice, tax relief. These aren't natural. They're signals meant to call one group in and push another out. And then there's issue voting. We're told that we must cast a ballot based on one issue, like abortion, guns, taxes, immigration. That becomes the defining test of identity, even when that single issue doesn't reflect the complexity of our lives. Add to that the framing of elections as the lesser of two evils. How often do people vote not because they're inspired, but because they fear the alternative? Victoria, what are your thoughts on dog whistles and single issue voting, coded languages, and the lesser of two evil framing?
Well, I do think that the language that we use has been weaponized and the meaning of things has completely warped from probably the original intention. The word woke comes to mind for what that means to different people. Privilege is another one that evokes all sorts of emotions and can be intended to be an insult. I am interested in things like the deconstruction theory on how different people, again, based on their experiences, associate words with different meanings that are different. Even if you have the same political views, it could mean something totally different. It's part of what is contributing to the division in our country.
As I'm thinking about dog whistles and these phrases that sound one way on the surface, but are really signaling something different depending on the hearer. I feel like one of those that is happening for me is unity. I like the idea of unity on its surface level. This thing that I have come to think that we mean by unity, of coming together, one another. but it feels a little dog whistly in it because I don't always know that, depending on who's in conversation with one another, if we have the same idea of what unity actually means. Because I don't feel that unity is supposed to equate to conformity or acculturation or assimilation. That unity actually is supposed to be that you bring you to the table, I bring me to the table, we accept one another, love one another, and now we create this new, right? Not to the diminishment of either one of us. In the addition of us, that you are valuable, that what you have, what you are, who you are matters. And it feels like so often that even when those who are spouting, can't we all just get along? Can't we all just be unified? It usually feels like it's under this auspice of, can't you just do what I want you to do? Can't you just think the way that I want you to think? Instead of just being able to say like, yeah, you and all your complexity, I can love that. I can be with you on that. And we can find our common grounds, and these are the roads that we're going to tread down together. And then along those ways, hopefully the humanity in one another brings us to this point where we now invest in this ownership of one another. That we become, oh, that is my brother, that is my sister, right? Regardless of that thing, not even regardless, like alongside that thing, whatever that thing is that's supposed to be the division. I don't think that's intended to be dog whistling. I really do think that most times when people do use phraseology such as unity and coming together, and that there is a good intent to it, I can understand the overarching message. But I want those things to really be taken into consideration when we're talking about the divisiveness that happens amongst groups, right? So the example of women's suffrage and women were fighting for the rights for one another. Even when that occurred, so often Black women didn't feel heard within that movement. And it was Black women that later were getting some of the same rights as their woman counterparts were getting. And so even though it was this thing, it's like, it's women, right? But are we really talking about all women at that point in time? Were we talking about Black women? Were we talking about immigrant women? Were we talking about senior women and young girls? And not, like, you know, and again, you can go down all of these different roads, but I want, when we're talking about even something like unity, that we're really talking about all encompassing, and we're not talking about having to diminish.
Yeah, that is one that I hear being used a lot on the right here lately. And I wonder what they mean by that. I've even questioned what we should be calling it that we want. Is it solidarity? Is it unity? But I think that that's where we need to stop possibly using buzzwords and start explaining what we mean.
I will say right and left. Well, you said I statement, you say you hear on the right. I heard on the left too.
Unity.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, this is back to our last episode where I do think that we all have a desire to live in harmony together. It just seems impossible right now. I think that that could be by design. I think that there are people who are benefiting financially from our division, and that there could be some, maybe getting ahead of
No, you're fine.
of ourselves, but I do think that it's possible that some people in the 1% are wanting to consolidate power and buy up resources, and our division is a way to accomplish that. And I think that we are being manipulated, honestly, into attacking each other rather than seeing what's really going on here. Because I think we do. We fundamentally all want to live in a safe environment where we can all thrive and be happy and you know, feel safe and loved. And we've been tricked into thinking that's not possible right now. And we've been tricked into thinking the only solution is a civil war to some. And that's just flat out not true. And I think that we are also under the illusion that there are these evil people out there that are just like, ha 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 ha, you know, and it's not real. I've heard someone who is a good friend who probably doesn't quite know my political leanings, who mentioned that they think that we'll be in a civil war. In my mind, I'm like, what does that mean to them? Does that mean that they're going to shoot me one day? What does it mean? But I doubt they think of me as that enemy that would be on the other side of the line or whatever. And I don't know what I don't know what it would look like in there. When people say that, I don't know what they mean, but I think that we're allowing people to take these dog whistles and triggering words and use them to create narratives that enrage people and villainize people to the point where we think that it's too late for us to come back together.
Yeah, I think 2 questions. The first question is like, what do the evil people, what noise do they make? Can you show us that again? The second thing is, I think you're spot on, right? We're talking about why we're divided, forces that perpetuate the division and the divisive narrative. Similar to like, I'm going to make it real practical. A dog whistle, if you blow it, humans can't hear it. But if you blow it, the dogs hear it. They react to it. And so there's something about how the dog is wired in their neuroreceptors to be able to hear the frequency of the whistle versus humans not being able to hear the frequency of the whistle. But it's about a tool or an instrument that when deployed can connect and resonate with a particular species of animals. I think political dog whistles are constructed in a way to where when they're said out loud, the average Joe Blow may think it means one thing or not even hear to take pause. But the people it was designed for, it was wired for, they get it. And it means a thing to them that it means something different from us, right? They are not just political language. In fact, I believe that they are coded appeals for bias based off of race, class, religion that divide the voters on specific statements. Let me give you an example. We're also talking about single issue voting. That's another mechanism to divide us. When I say this term, a woman's right to make medical choices for their body, to some, I'm just talking about being able to go and make a doctor's appointment and to be able to see my doctor. However, to others, I'm talking about what?
Abortion.
And so when we talk about that dog whistle on either side, when we talk about women's reproductive rights or health rights, why not just say like, hey, where do you stand on abortion? But no, it's more palatable and it's less incendiary if we use the word women's medical right or medical choice.
Right to choose, yeah.
Yeah, right to choose.
Mm-hmm.
And even right to choose, people have gotten away from that more so. It was right to choose. And I think now it's women's choice, health choices, because it's becoming more sanitized. But it means a thing, and it's a divisive strategy that both sides use. And then you couple that with single issue voting. I cannot tell you how many people vote based off of domestic safety only, or financial tax code laws only, or abortion. In fact, 2022 polls found that 44% of youth voters say abortion was their single most important issue. Forget everything else. Forget healthcare, cost of living, education, and other issues. They're going to cast a ballot based off their perceived alignment ideologically with a candidate on one topic. So I think you take single issue voting and you take dog whistling, it creates the perpetuation of divisive narrative. You feed that into the algorithms, and then the clickbait we see, we enter these echo chambers that reinforce our political ideology, and we become more and more and more extreme, and the divide widens versus it's really a complexity of things. I agree with some of the statements made by some parties, and I disagree with some of the statements made by my party, right? And the answer is somewhere there in the middle. I'm not saying you have to be a centrist or a moderate anything, but I'm just saying you have to look at the totality and the complexity of our political system, structure, and the policies and individuals that we put in office to make these decisions, as opposed to listen to sound bites and anchoring our beliefs on a single topic or a thing, and then leveraging dog whistles to perpetuate and sow seeds of division and hate amongst our fellow man.
Absolutely. Well said. But it begets the question for me in this instance about how much is a natural progression of language and how much is intentional for the purposes of dog whistling like you're talking about. Because sometimes these phrases are evolving over time, because you used the word sanitized a moment ago, but maybe they really are being cleaned up, or maybe it's better encompassing, maybe it's more direct. But then there's other times where it is being weaponized. How does one determine which is which? How do you determine when there's a natural progression? Because some will talk about political correctness. Like there's certain things we don't say anymore. Like we don't say retard anymore, right? We've gotten away from that because we've understood like.
It makes my ears bleed.
You see what I'm saying? Right? And that's why we got away from it, right?
And it's offensive to
Right. So now we have
intellectual.
so we've evolved to have new. See, that's a natural progression of language.
Right.
To say like, wow, we really need to clean this one up and do something better because of all the connotations that exactly happening now.
Right.
And then some other times it's political correctness, overkill, and can be that now you're no longer calling a thing, right? Not in that instance of retard at all, right? But I'm saying in other language aspects of things to where you're no longer calling a thing. And now it is becoming that dog whistly thing because it now means some other connotation.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
how our language has evolved. Yeah. And, like homelessness versus unhoused is now and that's another thing is the goalpost keeps changing. I'll talk about another one.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be African American was the politically correct term. Now it's Black American, Black.
Oh, that's complex.
I know. And this is the problem is now you'll see people, they'll whisper it, Black, or they'll say it quieter or something like that because they don't know. Or they'll, I've just seen a lot of gymnastics happening.
What do you prefer?
Say it loud. I'm Black and I'm proud.
Yeah.
And purposely so, because I want to encompass the diaspora. And I say that in the sense of Idris Elba is not African American.
Right.
Usain Bolt is not African American, he's Jamaican. But those are Black men and those are my brothers. And so Black encompasses the diaspora for me to be able to know that shared experience, whether on different continents and in different areas. I understand when we talk about the concept of colorism, that they're having a shared lived experience with me in this world to where they're showing up the way they are, and that means something.
Right.
There's an historical connotation to it, and there's a way they're having to navigate this existence. So, yes, even though I am technically African American, meaning an African born in America with American heritage that is of African descent, I still very much resonate with brothers and sisters from around the globe and the diaspora. So Black encompasses that for me. Right.
The evolution of language. And then one's interpretation of the language and its implications on how we use it and the meanings that we draw from it.
Indeed.
And I heard Joe Rogan and Matthew McConaughey talking, and Matthew McConaughey said he thinks that's where woke went too far is people are not using the right language or they're having a bad day and they said the wrong thing and then they're canceled. How do y'all feel about that, the cancel culture? And part of that was the Me Too movement. Some people might call it DEI and being sensitive in using certain language. And I personally have experienced a situation where someone related to me said something inappropriate and I did snap at them for saying that, but I guess I should have done more in the eyes of the person that felt they were receiving a comment related to race. And then that person went around talking about that situation as if I didn't do the right thing. And so that was just a little glimpse into what it could be like for some people. And I do think that white Americans specifically, I do think there is some validity in some of those feelings, because if they feel they don't know what are the right terms to use, and they're going to be, they can't do anything right, even if they were trying to be an ally and they just didn't say the right thing one time, they could be labeled a racist or what have you. So how do we move forward in that space? Is it that we stop using these buzzwords because they are so inflammatory and they have too many different meanings? They're being weaponized too much. So instead we try to avoid those words.
Or can we just simply be corrected? I don't want us to get above being corrected.
What does corrected mean?
Meaning that I am not a woman. So there may be some phrase that I use along the way that you as a woman say, hey, now, hold on, right? And can I just simply say, okay, hey, teach me more about that. I didn't understand the connotation of that. And you like, well, yeah, when you say that, and you educate, hey, I apologize. I didn't understand I was being offensive when I said that. I thank you because now I understand a little better. I'm not going to utilize that anymore, right?
And
there
should
could
they
be
say
enough,
it though?
There could be enough love and humanity to teach one another in those moments. and me actually feel good about walking away. Like, man, I kind of was putting my foot in my mouth, didn't even really know, but I know now.
Yeah, and I appreciate
Right?
you. Thank you. You
And I
made me
appreciate
better.
you.
You made me a better human.
And so that would require the person who's offended to make a statement and tell that person to their face, hey, that offended me, rather than running around town talking smack when you never addressed it directly.
Yeah, ideally, but we have to meet each individual at their level of need and their level of maturity and their level. And the biggest issue with humanity, I think, is the inability to deal with conflict. People deal with things differently. For them, that's them addressing it, and there's an epidemic of cowardice behavior, right? And so I think that's easier said than done. Your confrontation style is direct. Mine is direct. Q's is direct. I think that's different for some people. Most people is not. And so, like, yeah, I think it's for me to bring something to you. Number one, I have to, when you offended me, I have to believe that you're going to be receptive to it. If you're not going to be receptive to it, I'm not coming to you. So I think there's a yes and. I think there's a both sides of the coin. Number two, the biggest risk is I have to be okay with bringing something to you and then you not receiving it. And in that moment, to your point, I have a choice. I can fuel hatred. I can dismiss them. I can understand where they're coming from. I can laugh it off, or I can try to, in that moment, educate. Through my pain, through my disappointment, I could try to say, listen, that hurts me and that assaults my intelligence. Now, this will be unpopular, but if I say that, then I got to deal with white woman tears.
Well, and I think that's another one that, I think that this whole white fragility thing.
I didn't say that.
Well, it's another one of those buzzwords, and I do think it's done a lot of damage. I've talked about where we were in a situation where we were calling it sip and chats, where it was people of color who were inviting candidates for a prominent position.
Sorry.
Candidates for a position to come and speak to us and have dialogue. And this person was probably tired because it was later at night. They'd been running around all day, and we were having a conversation that was race related, and they cried. And in the moment, I could tell we all felt the same way. This is white fragility. And later, much, much later, probably over a year later, I started thinking about that as the wrong way to see that, because we want people to have breakthroughs and realize that perhaps something they said was offensive, or perhaps they were wrong, or perhaps they just simply had no idea that you would receive something that way. And they are heartbroken by the fact that they did that. That's something we should celebrate instead of...
Yes, but unless you want then the conversation to be focused on how hurt you are that you hurt me.
What? I mean, what do you mean?
Because oftentimes when that happens, the whole root of the conversation stops, and now we enter into, are you okay?
Can we now comfort you?
Can we comfort you? And...
what is a breakthrough, though? Like, how would you rather them react?
There's a difference between an authentic breakthrough, because I do agree with you there. We want people to get the moment.
You're right.
We want you to have an authentic breakthrough. There's also a difference when it's manipulation, or now it's narcissism, because
it's about you.
Yeah, I might have offended this whole room, but since I'm in tears now, y'all all need to comfort me, and everyone will now make me feel okay.
And this is another one of the basic problems. There's no right way to speak. There's no right way to react.
You're right.
And no matter what you do, unless you catch that really fine, like perfect reaction, then you're screwed. And I think that is what the white people are so angry about.
And black
Truly.
people too. I agree. And this conversation should be happening on a national platform.
It is.
Because, yeah, you're right. Because you are right. I love this conversation. But I do want to go back to answer your question. From my perspective, I do believe that there's a quote: you'll make all people happy sometimes. You'll make some people happy all the time, but you'll never make all people happy all the time. And so when we talk about cancel culture, I think there's a moral imperative to speak your truth in a way that is respectful and understanding of others' varying perspective. But at some point, you have to move on. And I know a whole focus is unity and understanding and prioritizing humanity over any sort of civil or social divide. And I'm all for that. And at some point, you're going to come to a point to where there are some people that are so entrenched in their beliefs and in their hate that it's not worth engaging in conversation, because the goodwill that I feel like I have to connect with someone who have a varying opinion needs to be expended on someone who is receptive to the conversation. I'm not going to go argue with the desk and try to convince the desk that it's a door, but I will work across the aisle, across the street, across the class system with anybody on the topics and the issues that are of importance. But I do think that even with that, even when it's not extreme, to your question, there is a cancel culture. If I disagree with you slightly on the slightest thing, then I'm de facto insignificant or unsophisticated or an extremist. And that's not the reality. And it happens on both sides.
Absolutely.
We must stop doing that. I think there is the youth, I'm a bell-shaped curve guy, right? I think the majority of us have good common sense. And I also believe that there are some extremists that, there's the 7%ers that we want to bring in, 7% on either side. We want to sort of bring into the fold to this 80% range. But I think there's also some 3%ers that are just going to be out there on their island of themselves. And we have to understand and embrace the balance between how might I work within a realm of what is reasonable, and that's individual, to really understand. The quote, the Covey quote: "We need to seek to understand as opposed to be understood." I think that's more applicable now in our political discourse than ever before. I want to understand where you're coming. Okay, I can understand that from your background. Here's how my background is slightly different. And here's the origin, the epistemology of how I understand this body of knowledge and how it shapes who I am. And then I still disagree with you and you still disagree with me, but I love you, brother. I love you, sister. You are a human. And here are areas we agree on. Here are the areas. Let's focus on these things as opposed to accentuating the places where we disagree and then cutting each other off, canceling. Cancel culture in the media, cancel culture in friendships, cancel culture in family because you disagree. That is bizarre. I think equally as bizarre, though, is me trying to argue with the desk and convince it that it's a door.
And that's not what I'm not talking about trying to, if someone is so extreme, they're not going to listen to you. That is totally different than what I'm talking about. I'm talking about in our normal conversations, if someone says something that really hurts you, to take a beat and tell them to their face in the moment, hey, that hurt me and this is why. And give them a chance to have a dialogue with you. Yes. And I think that ended during, the whole movement. I don't know what you would call it, DEI movement, but people of color had started to take a posture of, I'm tired and I'm not going to explain this to you. And I think that this is a great debate though, right? This is an important topic.
Yes.
Important topic. I get it. But at the same time, if someone doesn't know where to even start on that, I think that the most powerful way to get through to somebody is to tell your personal, and in that moment, explaining why from someone that's real, that they know. And I think that because things have swung so far over the other direction, we have to start talking to people again and having those uncomfortable conversations that we may be extremely exhausted having them. But if we don't, they won't understand unless they see somebody directly who has been affected or is offended, or, and you can have those conversations. That's my vote. But tell me, how do you all feel about what I just mentioned? I saw a reaction.
I thought it was beautifully put and laid out, and I appreciate the conversation, and it's valid. I do have a response, but I'll defer to Q.
No, it's fine. All right. So So Jay and I laughed because an entire conversation happened through telepathy right there.
Yeah.
In that moment. Because I definitely understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. I understand what you mean. But so my only thing was just when you said that about people of color being tired, particularly of the explanation of things, it was like my first thing was rightfully so.
Yes.
And that was my thought as well. And so I knew that we both, I am tired of explaining why that was, yeah.
Yeah. And I definitely understand what you're saying and agree. Because that is what we're saying right now, for the most part, is that
we have to talk again.
Well, I think it's about understanding time, place, and moment. It's about understanding responsibility and calling. Because the thing is, it's not for me to go on the internet and scroll social media and comment to everything that I feel is different than the way that I think, or every injustice I see, or everything that I feel like is offensive to me. That's not my calling. That is not my time and place. That is not those things. But there are absolutely opportunities within my sphere of influence where it is directly in my purview at that moment to make sure that I am doing exactly what we're talking about, that I do address, that I do educate. And I come at it from a place of love. And if that can continue to happen and that love can be reciprocated, or we can have intellectual discourse about it, then great. But to Jay's point as well, when I see that this is now just barking up the wrong tree, I am talking to a table, then ain't no reason for me to keep going down that same road and wasting time, energy, and effort on something that really is only going to expend from me, because clearly this person is not being expended by it whatsoever, right? So I think there's a balance to it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that, again, I'm talking about that 80% that are reasonable.
Trying to get that middle.
And that are, there's a lot of people who, I'm trying to think how to say this, that are spiritual people, religious people who ultimately, they do want to live a life that either follows Jesus's path or Allah or Buddha. I do think that fundamentally people do want to be good neighbors, and I think that we need to give them a chance again.
Yeah.
It happened again.
So
for me, it's a Hail Mary in a way. It's
good religious connotation to your statement. Good job. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so here's what I think, right? So here's my response to that. I would say you're absolutely right. And I think there are certain conditions. I mean, like, man, some real deep friendships have been impacted personally by this exact thing. I'm going to facilitate some dissonance here by switching the subject matter, the topic. And like, I'm still trying to figure out what mansplaining is.
And I got to stop saying that to people. Yeah. Do you want to know my opinion of what it is? Or what do you mean you don't know what it is?
I don't know what it is. What is mansplaining, right? And so I'm taking the same concept of, obviously there's something that I do that may offend my wife or may offend a female friend or a colleague or a business partner. And it's categorized as mansplaining, but I am ignorant to the violation that I have just facilitated unto someone I respect. So not necessarily that we have to get into what mansplaining is, but to your point, if you say, stop, I'm offended by that, I need to, on the recipient side of it, there's a few conditions that I think that make this approach acceptable. I think it has to be a trusting relationship. I think there has to be mutual respect. And I think that the conditions, the time, the environment need to be right for these conversations to happen. And I also I need to understand as the alleged violator that you may be tired of men over-explaining every little thing to you as a woman as if you're stupid. And so in my mind, what I'm doing is I'm playing back as the empathetic recipient of the critique. I am playing in my mind, okay, how could I have done that? I am searching for a way to validate your expression of disappointment in my actions. And I'm playing this in my mind and I'm trying to validate. And because I love and respect and care for the individual, I'm going to search deeper, but I'm not going to second guess her feelings in that moment. I'm not going to put the psychological and emotional burden of educating me on her in that moment because I'm the one that has perpetuated the offense. Instead, because of my empathy, which apparently that's a bad word, I am going to attempt to feel what she feels and replay the conversation in my mind to identify, when I said this and did that, that is like I was preaching to her, talking down on her, are things that men are supposedly experts. That's sexist, that's inconsiderate. Of course she knows what that is. I shouldn't have said that. I got to do better, Sajade. So in this instance, I'm flipping this conversation on its head.
I love this as the,
In this instance, I take the responsibility because I care for you and you said that thing that I have no clue what you're talking about. I think it's bizarre. I'm just talking to a friend. But for you, it hurt you. And you did have the courage in that moment to say that. But I'm not going to say, tell me more, show me, prove it to me. What do you mean? I disagree. I'm not going to argue with you about how you feel because your feelings are absolute and valid. And because I love you, I take them as valid. And so now I'm going to take the burden as the offender to reflect, to process, to step back, to connect, and to validate your feelings while understanding how my actions may perpetuate those feelings. I think, but by putting that on his head and saying, okay, you're saying you're tired, that was racist, that offended you. Tell me how. Show me how. I disagree. And you want me to argue my feelings in that moment and put the burden on me to explain to you how I thought that was the most racist thing you could have ever said in your life? No, how about you respect me and understand that what I'm telling you is this is how I felt. And I want you to process and do a little work, take some accountability and figure out how that bigoted statement might have offended or triggered me if you love and respect me and trust me and want and value this relationship.
Well, the problem is that people truly, genuinely don't understand sometimes how, and this is all I'm saying. And I am guilty of this.
We all are.
Is saying, oh, you're mansplaining, mansplaining under my breath. I'm saying it to another woman. And I think we got to stop doing that stuff.
How did I do with my definition of mansplaining?
That you did a great job, I think. I actually had to look it up because even I get confused about what some of these things
to a woman.
are.
Yeah, I caught the irony.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So what you were talking about is saying something condescending or in a patronizing tone. But then I've also heard it where a woman will make a statement, let's say in a boardroom, and there will be disagreement, and then a man right afterwards says the exact same thing.
It's like, oh yeah,
and so. But I hear even with news stations in conversations where they'll be throwing out words like snowflake and all these things. And it's just, we've gotten lazy.
In Alaska?
No.
What do you mean? What is snowflake?
I don't know fully what they mean when they say it. Maybe that you're fragile or that you're white, or I don't know what it means. But, we're throwing out these things as insults that are meant to be an immediate jab and shutdown rather than me saying, hey, when you talk to me like that,
makes me feel away.
Yeah. And instead of saying you're mansplaining, that's what I'm saying is we've got to start, I think, deconstructing these buzzwords.
Deconstructing has now become a buzzword too.
I know. By that, I just mean
we can't say anything.
Instead of using a buzzword that could mean so many different things to depending on who you are talking to, we need to start using our words and actually saying from our personal experience exactly what happened, because people truly, especially depending on if they haven't experienced a lot of feelings of oppression or marginalization, it is very hard. I've learned this through many conversations with white males that they're really just not connecting. They just don't get it. And I don't think it's for lack of, I don't think it's because they're dumb or anything like that. I'm starting to think that if you have not experienced oppression, it's harder to have empathy towards people of color or people who are disabled. But
you think it's a women's responsibility to educate these men who are mansplaining and oppressing the women of the error of their ways?
Because we're at this point where things are looking pretty scary out there, I am willing to have scary, difficult conversations with people to talk through some of these things. And again, it's based on they're a product of their environment. And we have to be around people that are different than us, that think differently than us.
But you're Victoria freaking Puente-Peters. You're a bad lady. But that's not everybody's reality.
And I guess it's a call to leaders
There we go.
in communities.
Under the right conditions.
Under the right safe
with people
conditions.
you trust in
yeah.
safe places at the right time and space.
Yeah. And one way that I've started doing it is just finding someone who I do feel is probably moderate, but has different opinions, and going to coffee with them and talking about some difficult issues. And I get to do it under the guise of this podcast exploration. But it's like, if everybody were doing more of this, maybe we wouldn't be so close to the CW.
We're not having a CW. We're close. I think this is.
I think we need to be aware it's possible. I
agree.
I think we need to be aware people are talking about this in a very serious
CW
way.
is Civil War.
Yeah.
I tell you what, let's do this. Let's take our break. But we'll continue to explore this. And we're going to, of course, like we always do, try to get into some solutions. And we right back like we left something. As we get ready to draw this episode to a close, we want to make sure we ask the question about how do we as a nation, how do we as people begin to shift us toward this unity? I know that I said a lot about unity in our other segment and kind of how that can have a rub for me at times, right? But the overarching thought about unity, I absolutely am in on, right? The real thing of unity that I believe that most of us really do have a concept of what coming together looks like, but how do we shift ourselves there? So I will say that the way that I feel we shift ourselves there toward unity, and I feel like it was happening in the conversation we were having earlier, is this concept and aspect of grace. That we have to be able to have grace for one another, because Victoria, as you were talking about cancel culture is that lack of grace. Cancel culture is saying there is no room for error, because if you do err, we're going to get rid of you. And that is just absolutely a lack of grace. It's absolutely an expectation that none of us can hit. He who without sin cast the first stone, right? Like you have to look at the log in your eye before you can look at the speck, right? On your brother and sister, because we're human. We don't always get it right. We're going to mess up. And when we do so, can our fellow humans lend us enough grace for us to be able to evolve, right? I look at myself and I look at me in this iteration of myself at 44. If I look back at 34-year-old Q, I think 34-year-old Q is an idiot, right? I think 24-year-old Q is definitely an idiot. And boy, if we keep going back, right? And it's not even that I'm not an idiot now, because I'm hoping that if things go the right way at 54, I'm going to look at 44-year-old me and say, dang, I was an idiot. Why? Because I grew, I evolved, I got more information, I had these conversations. I can look at myself as a smarter, evolved version of myself because I've had lived experience. I've had academia. I've had good conversations. I've had people around me to sharpen the iron to where I am sharper a little bit from now. But if the second I err, you throw me away, how am I ever going to get to a point to where I am a better version of myself at that time? That shift for me has to happen by us being able to extend some grace toward one another to grow and evolve. What about you, Sajade?
I agree, man. I agree. This is such a complex topic. I'm so glad to be having this conversation with people that I love and respect and trust. That's why we're doing this. We want to open the windows of our personal development and growth to others to try to make the world a better place. And I think it's really about prioritizing humanity. The path to unity is to prioritize humanity. And I think regardless of what we agree and disagree on, it's how we agree and disagree. If we blindly, loyally follow and trust without critique, we're just as wrong as those people who outrageously object. And so I'm reminded of the Neil Bohr quote, the opposite of a fact is falsehood, but the opposite of a truth could be another truth. That's because truths are shaped by our experiences and how we experience the world. I think we have so much more to talk about, so much more to uncover. But I think that the moment we stop accepting the reality that ultimately there are many different variations and beliefs and mindsets on particular topics, then we stop growing and we stop believing in the good in humanity. And because I love and see you and trust you, I yearn to understand your perspective. But equal to that desire to understand your perspective is a yearning and a longing for you to see mine. And I think the world must embrace that with a stranger. And it takes courage, it takes vulnerability. And I don't know that humanity in our world is in that place and our country is in that place right now, but I want to work like hell to get it there.
Well done. Well done.
I think that some of that applies to relationships too, with spouses and significant others. It's communication. It's healthy communication. And then another piece of it, I believe, is also working on emotional regulation, because we can't have those difficult conversations with people if we can't ourselves emotionally regulate when we are triggered. So that's another thing, in addition to extending grace, is to also work on things that trigger us so that we can then go in and have a conversation with someone who we know probably has different views and just open up a dialogue. I think it's so important that we start sitting down and having conversations with people and trying to humanize each other and let people see that, hey, I'm on the other side of the aisle, but we still love each other, or right. I'm a human. I'm not those things that you see on TV that people have villainized, and just start to explore with each other again. And it is scary. And again, this is a call to leaders and people who are extroverted and things like that. That won't work for everyone, but I think we just have to try and put ourselves out there.
There is a version that can work for everyone. It has to be internalized and had to be within their gifting and their sets, but no one's immune. It's going to take all of us.
That's right.
So you have to find what that looks like within your own skill sets or whatever that is. Right. And to your point, I feel like in the religious connotation of one, we have to stop looking at one another as the enemy simply because they're different or simply because they have a different point of view, no matter how extreme. But even if I do look at one as my enemy, in the religious connotation I have, I'm supposed to love my enemy. And I'm supposed to pray for those who misuse me. So even then, the onus is still on me, even in that moment, to do something greater than what is being done to me. Right? That is grace. That is a huge measure of grace that I fail at a lot. But if we are doing the work of growing and evolving, I have to be able to look and point the finger first here before I'm talking about how bad I'm being done or what's being done to me in those moments. So I don't think anyone's exonerated.
True. And we can explore different ways that different personalities could extend that olive branch. And then another thing, this just reminds me of something we do in our consulting, is to challenge assumptions. We sometimes make assumptions about people that are not accurate. And that is another thing you can discover through dialogue, having conversations. So that wraps up today's episode. We talked a little bit about the forces that could be dividing us. And next episode, we're going to continue building on this conversation and exploring how division shows up in everyday life and where we can begin to repair.
Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this content and would like to support our work, please like, subscribe, and share the Long Game Culture Podcast.